An oak tree once spoke to a reed.
You have every right to complain about nature. A wren is a heavy burden for you, and the slightest breeze that ripples the water's surface forces you to bow your head. Meanwhile, my forehead, like the Caucasus Mountains, not only stops the sun's rays but defies the fury of the winds. Everything seems like a zephyr to you, while everything seems like a tempest to me. If only you grew beneath my shelter, beneath the cover of my foliage, you would be protected from the storm. I would shield you from the wind. But no, you prefer to grow along the windy banks of the rushing river. Nature has treated you unfairly.
The reed replied, "Your compassion springs from good intentions. But do not worry about me. The winds are far less terrible for me than they are for you. I bend and do not break. You have resisted their furious assaults until now, but let us wait and see." At these words, a violent storm erupted. The north wind unleashed its fury. The oak stood firm, the reed bent low. The wind redoubled its efforts, and finally uprooted the oak whose head touched the heavens and whose feet reached the realm of shadows. But the reed? It survived. Bent, yes, but unbroken. A lesson written in wood and wind, strength through flexibility. It is better to bend than to break.
Some readers complain that my tales are too light, too simple, lacking the heavy gravity of scholarly works. They want dense philosophy, solemn arguments, and serious themes. But I tell you, not every mind needs to be burdened. Even the simplest fable, told with grace, can carry profound truth. Those who possess genuine taste do not demand weight where lightness suffices. They know how to appreciate the craft beneath the charm, to find wisdom wrapped in delight. So let the hard-to-please grumble. I write for those who understand that wisdom need not always wear a heavy cloak. Sometimes it arrives in the lightest of garments and speaks in a voice that makes you smile before it makes you think.
A certain lord owned so many cats that they became a true plague. These mouse hunters were so numerous that they were said to be more plentiful than rats. The few remaining rats lived in constant fear, barely daring to leave their holes. One day, an elderly rat, experienced and wise, called a council. The assembly gathered in a dark corner of the cellar. The old rat climbed onto a cheese rind and addressed the trembling crowd. "Gentlemen, our situation is desperate. We cannot go anywhere without risking our lives. This cursed cat lurks everywhere, watching, waiting. We must find a solution." A young rat stood up and proposed, "Let us hang a bell around the cat's neck. That way, we will hear it coming and can retreat to safety." The assembly erupted in applause. What a brilliant idea! But then an old rat asked the fatal question. "Excellent plan, but who will bell the cat?" Silence fell. No one stepped forward. One by one, the rats slipped away, each finding an excuse. The council dissolved, and nothing was done. A lesson in cowardice in council: it is easy to propose impossible solutions. The difficulty lies in execution. Many councils fail not from lack of ideas, but from lack of courage to act. A wolf accused a fox of theft before a monkey judge. The wolf stood tall, speaking of his honor and the fox's cunning deceit. The fox, clever and quick-witted, countered with evidence of the wolf's own crimes and hypocrisy. The monkey, perched upon a mossy stone, listened to both sides with an air of solemn wisdom. He stroked his chin, nodded gravely, and weighed each argument. Finally, he delivered his judgment.
Both of you are guilty. The wolf of greed and aggression, the fox of trickery and evasion. Therefore, I fine you both, one in honey, one in nuts, to be paid to the court.
The wolf and fox exchanged glances. They had come seeking justice, but found only a clever judge who turned their dispute into his own profit. A lesson in justice and cunning. When two scoundrels argue, the clever judge often benefits. True justice requires impartiality, not opportunism.
A man in his middle years, with hair turning salt and pepper, was courting two women. One was older, dignified, and wanted him to match her maturity. The other was young, lively, and wanted him to match her youth. Each day they would tend to his hair. The older woman, not wanting to look old beside him, quietly pulled out every dark strand she found. The younger woman, wanting to keep his appearance fresh, plucked out every silver hair she noticed. Between their conflicting efforts, the man soon found himself completely bald. He had lost his hair trying to match both expectations, and in the end kept neither. He stood before the mirror, staring at his bare head. The two women looked on, realizing what they had done. A lesson in compromise and consequence. You cannot please everyone. Trying to bend to opposing demands will only strip you of what you are.
Master Fox invited Lady Stork to a modest supper, hoping to keep things simple. When she arrived, the table was set with only a shallow clay plate holding a thin broth. The fox easily lapped up the soup with his broad tongue. The stork, with her long, narrow beak, could not draw up a single drop. The fox pretended to be apologetic, though he was privately amused. The stork left hungry but said nothing. A short time later, the stork invited him to her home. He arrived promptly, expecting a generous meal. The stork served stew in a tall, narrow-necked glass jar. She easily dipped her beak inside and ate at her leisure. The fox could only catch the wonderful aroma. His short snout was unable to reach past the narrow opening. His tail drooped, his ears fell flat, and he slunk home outwitted. A lesson in balance and consequence. Deceit is best repaid with cleverness. Those who play tricks should expect to be tricked in return. A gnat once declared war on the lion. "Do you think I fear you?" The tiny insect buzzed. "You may be king of the beasts, but I am faster, sharper, and far more clever." The gnat darted around the lion's head, landing on his nose, his ears, his neck, biting wherever the thick fur was thin. The lion roared, swiped with massive claws, and thrashed in fury. But the gnat was too small, too quick, too elusive. Exhausted and humiliated, the lion finally gave up and retreated. The gnat flew away, trumpeting his victory to the world. "I have defeated the king of beasts." But in his pride, the gnat flew too carelessly and straight into a spider's web. Trapped, helpless, he became a meal for a creature far smaller than himself. A lesson in humility and consequence. Pride blinds us to danger. The mightiest can be undone by the smallest foe, and the victor today may fall tomorrow.
A merchant led 2 donkeys along a dusty country road. One carried heavy canvas sacks packed with coarse white salt. The other carried large bundles of dry, porous sponges. They approached a shallow, clear river. The salt-laden donkey, feeling the weight of his burden, deliberately slipped and fell into the water. As the salt dissolved, his load lightened instantly. He stood up refreshed and continued the journey with ease. The sponge-laden donkey watched closely and believed he had discovered a clever shortcut. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the same stretch of river, but the sponges drank greedily, swelling with water until they grew twice as heavy. The donkey staggered under the crushing weight. He learned too late that what relieves one burden will only deepen another. A lesson in judgment and context. A solution tailored to one situation may ruin another. Copying a shortcut without understanding the nature of your own burden is a recipe for disaster. A lion lay sleeping in the sun-dappled forest, his massive paws crossed and his breathing deep. A tiny field rat, scurrying through the undergrowth, accidentally ran across his nose. The great beast opened one eye, raised a heavy paw, and pinned the trembling creature. "You dare disturb my rest?" he growled. "Spare me, your majesty," the rat pleaded. "If you let me go today, I promise I will repay your kindness." The lion chuckled at the idea. Still, he lifted his paw. "Go," he said, "but do not cross my path again." Sometime later, the lion's desperate roar echoed through the woods. He had stepped into a hunter's snare, bound tightly in thick, knotted ropes. The more he thrashed, the tighter the knots became. The little rat heard the cries. Recognizing the voice, he scurried to the trap and began to gnaw at the thick ropes. One by one, the coarse fibers snapped. The net loosened, and the great lion slipped free. He looked down at the tiny creature and bowed his great head. "I laughed when you promised to repay me," the lion said softly. "Now I know no act of kindness is ever wasted, and even the smallest friend may prove the greatest. A lesson in mercy and scale: never underestimate the small. For kindness, once given, always finds its way back." A tiny ant wandered to the edge of a forest stream. She leaned too close, slipped, and was swept into the current. High above, a dove watched. Without hesitation, she dropped a broad green leaf into the water. The ant climbed aboard, drifting safely to the bank. Days passed. Peace returned to the woods, but danger does not always announce itself. A hunter crept through the underbrush, raising a long pole with a snare net toward the dove's branch. The ant saw him. She climbed quickly to his bare ankle and bit down hard. The hunter flinched, dropped the pole, and the dove flew safely into the canopy. From that day on, the woods held a quiet understanding between them. A lesson in gratitude and scale. Kindness is never wasted. Even the smallest friend may become the greatest protector when you need them most.